get it from reading the newspaper and doesn't understand, one of the things that you say with this study with the 400 readers that tried to decide, the idea of vividness, the thing that you say is that when Shakespeare said, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" The answer is, yes, of course you should. Then I can kind of understand what you're saying. Otherwise, we're just, caught in abstraction. And really what it is designed to do is give you a structure to deal with abstraction, because it is difficult to talk about mortality. It is difficult to talk about love and loss and things like that they're such a human thing that it's difficult. And like I said, when you first find out that you're going to be a father or a mother, the feeling, you can go through all the logic, and everybody does, but there's a whole nother side of you that has an entirely different reaction to that, which is much more, sometimes I think it's much more profound than the logical one. It's the part that feels like, I'm going to be a daddy. Yes!
Did you do writing in high school?
Wow. Did my teacher send you? I have to tell you, something really, really bizarre happened to me. I'll share this with you real quick. I was speaking in Red Lake Falls 2 days ago. And who should show up but obviously my 12th grade English teacher. And I tell all these stories about how I, when I came to like poetry, and how poetry, if you listen to the interview on Pioneer Radio 90.1 I did before I came here, I did it over the phone. I was saying how the World Trade Center affected me, but also that being a finance lawyer, I had to deal with logic all the time. And there was a part of my brain which was bored stiff and couldn't stand it. And I used to deal with that in law school. I always listened to classical music, so that it's sort of like you had like a puppy that needed to be entertained. So if you gave it, as long as it didn't have words, if it was just music, it kind of took care of the right brain that wanted to do something, while the left brain could memorize everything it needed to do and understand what it needed to do. But poetry actually became that part of my career where you had to have an outlet to counterbalance all this logic use of your left brain. And that allowed me to keep my sanity. I think that, did it make me a better poet? I think it did. But did it make me a better lawyer? Yes, it did, because I would have been bored stiff and I would have quit long before then. But even though I say all that, all of a sudden my teacher's sitting there, and she came by and she had a gift for me. And I thought, what is this? I thought, is she making a donation? Because all the books that I sell, all the money goes to the Northwest Libraries. All the proceeds from all the sales. And I thought, well, this must be a check or something. And this is what she sent me. And I thought, wow. She said, open it. And I thought, okay. So I sat down and I read what it said. And it basically said, here's a blast from the past. And when I opened it and I took it outside, it was my poetry from when I was in 12th grade. And she had kept it. And this is a lady who's 70 years old and is retiring. And I thought, how in the heck do you have that? And I pictured her house, and I pictured her with the thousands of students that she had, with each file on them. Okay, Cameron, yeah, let's see, C, this is 80s, we're gonna go to 80s, C, there, okay. But it turned out, and I read the poetry that was there, and God, it's primitive, but it does have a lot of the universal thoughts about it. Even it uses the word universal in a conclusion of a poem that's sort of like the Canterbury Tales, running through different types of people that are on the journey. But I was really, really surprised, and I asked her why she still had it. She said, it's because I use it teaching. And I said, really? And she said, would I lie to you? And I said, yes. And she laughed. Anyway, so it does show that I have had an interest for a little bit in poetry, longer than I probably remember even, because that's from over 35 years ago, That's like 36, 37 years ago I wrote that. If you can read my handwriting, I don't know how Mrs. Matsky ever did that. It's a good story too, because she's retiring in May, that's her last time. Yeah?
Scott, how do you write your poetry? Is it something that you go, I'm going to sit down and write a poem? Or do you just kind of see or experience something and it all happens?
For a lot of writing, you have to sit down at your desk, stare at the screen until blood starts coming out of your forehead, and then write. And that's how you write novels. That's how you write short stories and everything else like that. But poetry does not lend itself to that. Poetry, for me, always has have to had an inspiration, something that has hit my right brain, and I'm trying to figure it out. And then I try to come up with a poem after it. It's always a strike on the right brain, something that's happened that leads to, you can see here about those 5 dots that I just went through. Each one is linked to a specific event. The expatriates once was explained to my daughter. Did I read Displacement even? I don't even think I did. I didn't, yeah. I'll give you one more quick poem. This is my daughter. She goes up to me and she says, Daddy, what am I? She's 15 years old. I'm very proud of her, by the way. She just got her final exams back from university and she passed them all today this morning, so I'm incredibly happy. I said, you make me so happy. How am I supposed to read dark poetry? But anyway, what was that? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, Hannah. And she said to me, Daddy, what am I? She's 15 years old. She was born in America. She was born in Connecticut. Her dad's an American. She can speak with an American accent perfectly. She sounds like she's from Red Lake Falls. And she's a U.S. citizen. And then her mom's Swedish. She speaks Swedish, like she's from Vormlands in Sweden, where Karlstad is. And then she's lived in England her whole life. We moved there when she was 4 years old. And so she started doing these weird drawings, and she's a very, very feeling child. She had this artwork, and she'd have like her head in America, her heart in Sweden, and her body in England. It's like, whoa, without getting into too much of the macabre nature of these drawings, she was really confused. And she said, Daddy, what am I? And the answer really quick was sort of like, you're whatever, the real answer is whatever you decide, whatever you think you are. And there's no way to really mathematically define whether you're American, Swedish, or English. It's something that only she can decide. But just to make it a little bit lighthearted, because she's a relatively anxious child, I wrote this poem for her. It's called Expatriates. A displaced man from someplace married a displaced woman from a different someplace. Displaced lives intertwined in their displaced space, raising displaced children with no place to call their place in their displaced space. Replace that place with some other someplace to try to find a place not to feel displaced, but are in fact displaced until placed in their final resting place, never again to be displaced. That really cleared it up for her right away, so. Yeah. So yeah, the sequence of this type of writing is always idea first, then the poem, and it can hit you at any time, which makes it inconvenient to write poetry.
Do you have a job where you are? Do you teach in a college now?
No, I'm a writer now, so I write.
You're a writer.
Yeah, and I'm working on a short story collection which will come out in June. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm writing, there'll be a collection of short stories that will come out in June. And there may be a second collection that will come out in the end of December, or I might work on a novel at that point in time. Poetry keeps on happening, but you can't program poetry. That's why this book covers 26 years of thoughts, You can't just sit down, and it kind of gets me, because I have a lot of contemporary poetry friends who sign a contract to write a chapbook or something and sit down and write all the poetry, and it's like, it starts to lose its genuineness for me, because you're sitting down and you're manufacturing it, and that's the opposite of how I do it. And you'll see that if you look at some of the poems that are there.
I guess I have it's not really much of a question, it's more of a comment.
Yeah.
And I'm maybe possibly an odd person, but I thought your boring stuff about the right brain, left thing was actually fascinating.
Really, yeah.
I had never really thought about, I guess, the process of coming to poetry in those terms.
Yeah.
That's something I'm thinking over right now. I thought that was very...
The T.S. Eliot quote is the best one for describing that idea, is that you get it, but you don't understand why you get it.
Yeah.
They've actually done a study where they had people, they used to treat epilepsy by cutting the superhighway between the two hemispheres. You can still function with that. And it apparently stops the electrical storm from going from one hemisphere to the other in an epileptic. I don't think they do that procedure anymore. But what they found is a bizarre things, like they could use a screen so that they could see out of one eye and not see the other eye. So this way the brains don't have the eyes to link them together. So only one eye is seeing it. And so they could put the partition there, put something funny up there, and the person would laugh but not know why they were laughing. That's how weird our brains are. You know, when you think about it, our brains are so weird. It's amazing we can think, talk, or say anything with all this stuff that's going on all the time. It's amazing we can walk also with the opposite thing going either. I mean, but it is the fact that it's such an amazing organ. But what's really interesting about right now is that we're learning so much. In the last 10 years, we've learned more about the brain than we did throughout all of history, because of our ability to look at how the neural processes actually work, and also understanding better which regions of the brain control which functions. If you ever want to read if that is fascinating to you, there's a book called The Chimp Paradox by Professor Stevens. It's an incredibly good read because what it does is an oversimplified mind map. And it will go, I've done a very, very broad brush description of the brain. I mean, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more different chambers, and the way the thought process works, if you're interested in it, is a fascinating book.